Now, President Trump and the Republicans are trying to sell the country on their tax cut plans. Now, that plan, of course, involves massively slashing taxes on the rich and giant corporations. Now, what it does is very simply, and it's not a fully fleshed out plan, but it cuts tax brackets down from 7 to 3. Cuts the corporate tax rate down to 20%, down from the 35% that they're supposed to pay. Now, I say supposed to pay because in reality, very few companies actually do end up paying that. The real number is somewhere around 22%. But they're going to sell this or try to sell this by saying, hey, don't worry about it. These tax cuts, we're going to give it to the companies and they'll create jobs. Now, first they were like, no, this is middle-class tax cuts. It's going to benefit mostly the middle class. And then they're like, well, it's also going to benefit the rich. And then they're like, okay, it's going to benefit the rich, but they're going to create jobs. They always have to go with that. But here's the reality, right? And this is straight from the horse's mouth. According to Reuters, U.S. corporations are now saying that they would use tax reform windfall to buy back shares, retire debt, and other shareholder-friendly moves instead of create jobs. And this is in recent post-earnings calls with investors and security analysts. It's weird. It's funny. It's almost as if we were right all along and that we knew that they weren't going to use that money to create jobs. Weird. Now, this time, like I said, it's not us lefties saying it. It's the corporations themselves. In fact, you have the chief executive of Honeywell International, Darius Adamczyk, saying that tax reform will offer greater flexibility for Honeywell, adding that the industrial conglomerate would invest more cash in the United States to pay for dividends, mergers, and acquisitions, share buybacks, and paying down debt. Nowhere in there does it say jobs. Here's another one, Amgen. Now, this is Amgen's CEO, Robert Bradway, saying on Wednesday that any tax reform would be incorporated into its capital allocation plans, noting that the drug maker expects to continue to raise its dividend and buy back shares. Again, no mention of the word jobs. But wait, you know, if the main reason for this tax cut was to create jobs, then wouldn't it be mandated in the law? I mean, that would make sense, right? To give Indiana credit, that's exactly what they did. Like, okay, we're not going to, give you a subsidy or a tax cut until you actually create jobs in Indiana. You don't create jobs, you don't get the money. So is that mandated in this law? Maybe we're just missing it. Nope. It's actually not in there. Top Republicans have said that the legislation will not order companies to use tax reform windfalls to create jobs. Of course. Now, look, that's not the point of these tax cuts, okay? The politicians, they already know that these tax cuts are not going to create jobs. All this is that it's just a big giant handout to the donors. Now let's look at another piece of the tax bill that was proposed, and it's repatriation, right? They want to repatriate about the roughly $2 trillion held overseas. Now, Trump's proposal actually calls for mandatory repatriation, which is actually different than the Bush repatriation, which was optional. This is like, no, we're going to bring it all back. That all the $2.6 trillion stashed offshore, and it would bring it back at two different rates, 3.5% on earnings invested in illiquid assets and 8.75% on cash and liquid assets. That's slightly higher than the 5% during the Bush years. So there are some subtle differences, but it's essentially the same. So bring back all that money, what, $2.6 trillion. It's a lot of money. Is that going to create jobs? No. Analysts say that the situation could just be a replay of the massive 2004 repatriation holiday under President George W. Bush, in which 843 U.S.-based multinationals brought back $362 billion in overseas profit at a deeply slashed rate of 5.25%. Now, where did that money go to? Most of it went to stock buybacks and dividend increases. Great for the shareholders, not so much for creating jobs. Now, the tax break was called a costly failure in a 2011 report by the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, which found that it cost the Treasury $3.3 billion in lost revenue and produced no appreciable increase in U.S. jobs or domestic investment. In fact, there were a lot of companies that decided to cut jobs. So they get all this money back, and like, what are we going to do? Well, we're just going to buy back our stock, which, again, it's great for the shareholders and great for the executives, and they're going to pay themselves. Jobs? No, we need jobs. We're also going to put that money towards mergers and acquisitions, in which we usually just fire a lot of people. That's what happens, okay? Even George W. Bush was surprised. He's like, man, I thought that was actually going to create jobs. But, you know, I was hoodwinked. My God. So, look, we know that big businesses, right, won't hire. Okay, fine. What about small businesses? They're also impacted by this. Now, according to Reuters, even small companies, which pay the highest effective tax rate and would be the main beneficiaries of a Trump tax windfall, do not appear focused on hiring. Reuters contacted the 100 largest companies by market value in the benchmark Russell 2000 index of U.S. small and mid-cap stocks, as well as another 50 in that index that are not covered by securities analysts. None of the 17 companies that responded to Reuters mentioned creating jobs. Look, because they weren't going to. Tax cuts do not equal jobs. If you want jobs, there actually has to be a demand. You create a demand by making sure that there's money in the pockets of regular people and that they can go out and spend it. So policies like raising the minimum wage, for example, are an excellent tool to be able to create some of that demand. You know, more people have more money, they spend more money, they buy more things, and pretty soon companies are like, well, we have an increased demand in our products, so we're going to hire more people to help us meet that demand. It doesn't go the opposite way around. Giving giant tax cuts to the rich and giant corporations will not lead to jobs. Look, trickle-down economics, it doesn't work. Sure, you get trickle-down, but it's not money and jobs, okay? It's a failed ideology. Ironically, a Republican, George H.W. Bush, called it what it was, voodoo economics. It's time we retire this failed ideology of tax cuts to the dustbin of history where it belongs. It doesn't work. It's never gonna work. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.